The room fell silent the moment Jabari's voice sliced through the air. Guests froze, forks suspended midair, eyes widening as his words echoed across the elegant anniversary dinner. You, he scoffed loudly, pointing at Aisha as if she were a stranger. You're nothing without me. Everything you have comes from me. Laughter rippled from a few corners. Aisha stood there holding the edge of the table to steady herself, her breath trembling. Her cheeks burned, but her eyes dark, steady, unbroken, never left his. In that single moment, humiliation tightened around her like a fist. But beneath the pain, something fierce cracked open. If Jabari had looked closely, he would have noticed it. The quiet storm gathering behind her calm face. The kind of storm that doesn't destroy, but transforms. Months from now, the man mocking her tonight would walk into an office and meet a new boss, and it would be her. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you enjoy emotional African folktale dramas, feel free to subscribe so you never miss the next story. Aisha Kambule had always been the kind of woman people overlooked. Even as a child growing up in the dusty outskirts of Nidalani village, she learned early that silence was often safer than speaking. Her mother, a seamstress who worked until her fingers stiffened, used to cup Aisha's cheeks and whisper, "My daughter, you have a mind that shines brighter than gold. Don't let the world dim it." But the world did dim it slowly, quietly, relentlessly. From a young age, Aisha was fascinated by numbers, patterns, and the delicate dance of business. While other children played outside, she sat with old newspapers tracing her finger over stock prices she didn't fully understand, but instinctively felt drawn to. At school, she excelled, not loudly, not competitively, but with a soft brilliance that made her teachers smile and her classmates shrug. To them, she was the polite, quiet girl. No one suspected the fire beneath. Life hardened Aisha early. Her father died when she was 13, leaving the family with debts that swallowed their small home like a storm. Her mother's sewing paid only enough to keep food on the table, and Aisha took on small jobs, cleaning, tutoring younger kids, stacking shelves at a local shop. But no matter how tired she was, she studied every night, alone, with only her dreams for company. People admired her kindness, but they never imagined she could rise beyond modest expectations. She became used to being underestimated. She learned to smile politely when people assumed she wasn't capable. By the time she reached adulthood, the habit of shrinking herself had become second nature. And then came Jabari Moyo. Their first meeting had felt like a blessing at the time. Aisha was 22, working at a small corner store to help her mother. Jabari walked in with an easy swagger, the kind that made people turn their heads. He wasn't wealthy back then, but he had ambition, loud, aggressive, sparkling ambition. He talked big, dreamed big, and carried himself like a man destined for greatness. Aisha had never met someone so certain of himself. He noticed her immediately. "You're too smart to be working in a shop," he told her during their second conversation. "A mind like yours deserves to be beside a man with vision." No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever looked at her like she was more than her circumstances. So when Jabari pursued her attentively, confidently, passionately, Aisha believed she had finally been seen. Their early days were filled with sweetness. Jabari took her to restaurants she'd only seen on TV, bought her small gifts she cherished like treasures, and showered her with words that made her feel chosen. He claimed he wanted a partner who would walk beside him as he built an empire. But slowly, so slowly, she didn't realize it. At first, his admiration twisted into something else. He began to advise her what to wear. "Aisha, don't dress too flashy. It's not you. Then what friends to cut off? That girl is jealous of you. She'll hold you back." Then what career decisions she should make. "You don't need to stress about work. I'll take care of us. Stay home. Rest." Always said with a smile. Always sounding like love. And Aisha, raised in hardship, grateful for stability, grateful for being chosen, accepted it. She didn't notice that each compromise carved away a tiny piece of her spirit. Bit by bit, she gave Jabari the power to define her worth. When Jabari's business began to grow, she was genuinely proud. She celebrated his wins more than her own small accomplishments. He became the man everyone admired, charming, driven, confident. People praised him as self-made, overlooking the quiet woman who supported him through every sleepless night. Yet as Jabari's status rose, so did his need to dominate. Whenever Aisha mentioned wanting to take a course or apply for a job, he waved her off. "What for? I earn more than enough. No need to stress yourself. You don't have the experience anyway." The worst part, he said it lovingly as if he were protecting her. And Aisha, conditioned to believe she wasn't exceptional, accepted the lie. Only her mother noticed the change. "My daughter," she told her softly, "a man who loves you lifts you higher. He does not shrink you to stay above you." Aisha brushed it off. "Jabari only wants the best for me." But deep down something flickered, an unease, a quiet ache she couldn't name. Over the years, despite the limitations Jabari placed on her, Aisha found ways to nurture her love for learning. Late at night, long after Jabari slept, she would sit in the dim glow of her phone and watch free business courses on YouTube. She read articles, took quizzes, scribbled notes in a secret notebook she hid at the back of her closet. She learned quietly like a seed growing beneath the soil, unseen but alive. Still, even with all her secret studying, Aisha never believed she was capable of more. Jabari had spent years shaping her self-image. She believed him when he said she was too gentle, too naive, not built for leadership. She believed him because she had been conditioned to, until the night at the anniversary dinner. The moment he shouted, "You're nothing without me," something inside her snapped, not violently, not explosively, but in a quiet, soul-deep way. It felt like a mirror breaking inside her chest, scattering old beliefs across the floor of her heart. For the first time, she questioned everything. Who told her she wasn't capable? Who convinced her she needed him to exist? Why had she allowed another person to dictate her worth? As she stood there, trembling under the weight of humiliation, her childhood memories rushed back, her mother's whispers, her own dreams, her secret notebook filled with knowledge she had earned in silence. Aisha realized something Jabari would never understand. He hadn't created her. He hadn't made her valuable. He had only blinded her to her own strength. And that strength was awakening. In the days that followed, Aisha found herself thinking more deeply than she had in years. Every time she remembered Jabari's mocking voice, she felt the sting of shame followed by the heat of determination. She didn't know where her journey would lead, but she knew she could no longer remain the woman Jabari molded. She needed to reclaim her voice, reclaim her dreams, reclaim herself. And that decision, quiet, internal, powerful, marked the true beginning of her transformation. The world had dimmed her long enough. Now it was her turn to rise. In the weeks following the disastrous anniversary dinner, Aisha found herself watching Jabari differently, carefully, almost as if she were finally seeing the man she had been living with for years. And the more she observed him, the more she realized how long she had ignored the warning signs. Jabari had always been charming. That was the first thing people noticed. He walked into any room like the world owed him. Applause, shoulders squared, smile wide, voice steady with confidence. To outsiders, he was magnetic, ambitious, a natural leader. But behind closed doors, his charm shifted into something sharper. When they were newly married, his possessiveness came in soft, affectionate disguises. "I just worry about you," he would say, when telling her she didn't need more friends. "I know what's best," when he insisted she abandon a job opportunity. "You don't have the temperament for this," when she mentioned learning business management. The worst part wasn't the words, it was the way he said them casually, as if stating undeniable facts. Back then, Aisha had mistaken his control for care. Now she could see the truth. Jabari didn't want a partner. He wanted an audience, a mirror, reflecting his greatness back at him. Their home, once warm, felt colder as she awakened to the reality of their marriage. Jabari seemed to grow larger every time he belittled her, feeding on her silence, her compliance. But instead of shrinking like before, Aisha felt something inside her resisting. The humiliation he inflicted at the dinner sharpened her senses, making her pay attention in ways she hadn't before. She noticed how he needed to dominate conversations, always raising his voice slightly above others to secure attention. How he dismissed employees who dared to challenge him, calling them ungrateful or incompetent. How he treated her like a prop, something pretty supportive, never central. He valued her devotion, not her dreams. But to understand the depth of Jabari's behavior, one had to understand his past. Jabari grew up in a family where power was currency. His father, a strict military officer, had drilled into him that strength meant never showing weakness and that leadership meant controlling everything around you. Jabari learned early that the world respected loud confidence, not quiet ability, so he became loud. He worked hard not to become successful, but to be seen as successful. Image mattered more than substance. When he met Aisha, he saw in her both comfort and convenience. She was gentle, humble, supportive, the perfect balm for a man who needed constant admiration. Her quietness didn't threaten him. Her kindness made him feel superior. Her lack of confidence provided him endless leverage. And for years, his fragile ego fed on her softness. But the night he publicly humiliated her, something shifted. Jabari noticed her silence afterward. Not the obedient silence he was used to, but a stillness that made him uneasy. Aisha didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't plead for an apology. She simply withdrew into herself, and that frightened him more than any confrontation ever could. Meanwhile, Aisha began quietly reclaiming pieces of herself. She started reading more openly instead of hiding her books. She spent hours researching job openings, training programs, and online certifications. She watched interviews with women leaders across Africa, taking notes on their journeys. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she wasn't trapped under Jabari's shadow. But Jabari noticed even the smallest changes. One evening, he walked into the living room to find her studying a course on digital marketing. He frowned immediately. "What's this now?" he asked, leaning over her shoulder as if inspecting a child's homework. "A course," she replied calmly. "I'm learning something new." For what his voice sharpened. "You don't need this. You barely have time to take care of the house as it is." Aisha looked up at him, meeting his eyes without fear for the first time. "I need it for me." Jabari froze, startled by the firmness in her tone. "Since when do you talk like that?" "Since I realized I want more for myself," she said quietly. His jaw tightened. "Aisha, don't start this nonsense." "It's not nonsense," she replied. "It's growth." The word triggered him. Growth meant change. Change meant losing control. The rest of the evening was tense. Jabari paced around the house, muttering under his breath about disrespect and ungratefulness. He slammed doors, banged drawers, acting like a storm, desperate to reclaim dominance. But Aisha didn't react. She simply continued studying in silence. Her stillness unnerved him more than any argument would have. Days passed and Aisha grew more determined. She applied to small companies and startups across the city. She didn't tell Jabari not because she feared him, but because she knew he would sabotage it. She wanted her next steps to be her own. Then, unexpectedly, an email arrived, an interview invitation from M-Tech Commerce, a rising e-commerce company known for empowering young professionals. The moment she read the message, tears welled in her eyes, not from fear but from disbelief. Someone believed in her enough to offer a chance, but fear lingered too. What if she wasn't good enough? What if Jabari was right all along? What if she failed and proved everyone correct? Her mother's voice whispered in her memory, "My daughter, your fear means you're close to something important." The interview day came. Aisha wore her best blouse, simple but clean, and tied her hair neatly. As she prepared to leave, Jabari walked out of the bedroom, surprise written across his face. "Where are you going dressed like that?" he demanded. "I have an interview," she replied, steady and calm. He blinked. His tone mixed confusion and annoyance. "An interview," she repeated. "I applied for a job." "You applied without telling me," he snapped. "Why would you do something like that behind my back?" "Because it's my life," she said gently. Jabari stared at her as if the ground were shifting beneath his feet. "Aisha, listen, this is ridiculous. You don't need to work." "I provide everything." "You provide everything," she agreed softly, "except respect." The words stunned him. Before he could recover, she slipped out the door. The interview changed everything. Aisha expected stiff, intimidating executives. Instead, she met Madame Zuri Nyanda, a poised, confident woman with eyes that seemed to see straight into her soul. Zuri listened as Aisha spoke about her background, her struggles, her self-education. She didn't laugh. She didn't dismiss her. She nodded thoughtfully, as if Aisha's story mattered. "What do you want, truly?" Zuri asked at the end. Aisha hesitated, then whispered, "A chance." Zuri smiled. "Then a chance is what you'll get." When Aisha stepped out of that building, the sun felt warmer than she remembered. For the first time in years, she felt her heart expand with possibility. She didn't know it yet, but stepping into M-Tech Commerce was the first step toward a destiny that would one day place her above the very man who had mocked her worth. Aisha was no longer the woman Jabari could mold. She was becoming someone new, someone he would soon have no power over. And somewhere deep inside, even if she couldn't fully see it yet, her rise had already begun. The humiliation from the anniversary dinner did not fade from Aisha's memory. It lived inside her like a fresh bruise. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jabari's face twisted with arrogance, heard the mocking laughter from the guests, felt the burn of shame crawling up her neck. But that pain, instead of weakening her, sharpened her resolve. It became the spark that lit the fuse of everything to come. On the day she received her acceptance email from M-Tech Commerce, Aisha sat alone on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen. The words blurred through her tears not of sadness but of release. It had been so long since the world offered her something purely for herself. A chance. a beginning, a seed of hope. She whispered into the quiet room, "Thank you." She didn't know whether she was thanking God, fate, or her own courage. Maybe all three. But she also knew she had to face Jabari. He came home late that evening smelling of whiskey and ego. His voice boomed the moment he walked through the door. "Aisha, why wasn't dinner ready?" he demanded, loosening his tie, as if he were the only person who worked in the world. Aisha stepped out of the kitchen slowly. "I had an interview today." The words hung in the air. Jabari froze mid-step. He turned toward her with narrowed eyes, disbelief written across his face. "You went to that interview after I told you it was unnecessary." "Yes," she replied, steady. "And I got the job." The silence that followed was heavy, thick, with something dangerous. Jabari laughed, a short, sharp, disbelieving sound. "A job doing what? Picking orders, packing boxes. It's a position in digital operations," she said calmly. "I'll be trained and it's paid. Full-time." He stopped laughing. "Full-time?" His voice tightened. "Meaning you think you're going to leave this home every day and..." "What? Build some little career?" "Not little," Aisha said. "Meaningful." Jabari's lips curled into an insult. "You've been reading too many self-help posts. You think you're suddenly capable of something big." Aisha lifted her chin. "Yes." For a moment, Jabari stared at her as if he didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. She was no longer shrinking, no longer apologizing for wanting more, no longer afraid of his disappointment. The shift terrified him. He stepped closer, towering over her. "Don't forget who made your life what it is. Without me, you'd still be struggling in some dusty shop. I took you out of poverty." Aisha looked him straight in the eyes. "And now I'm taking myself further." That sentence landed like a slap. Jabari stormed out of the room, mumbling curses under his breath. But Aisha didn't chase him. She didn't apologize. She didn't retract her words. She simply breathed. For the first time, breathing felt like freedom. The next morning marked the start of her new job. She left early wearing a crisp blouse and the only pair of formal trousers she owned. On the bus ride to MTech's headquarters, Aisha clenched her hands together on her lap, rehearsing everything she wanted to do right. She feared making mistakes. She feared not fitting in. But beneath the fear was excitement, a quiet thrill rising in her chest. The glass building towered above her when she arrived, reflecting sunlight like a promise. Inside, the reception area buzzed with energy. Young professionals rushed across shiny floors, their movements purposeful. It felt like stepping into a world she had dreamed of her whole life. Aisha was greeted by a woman with bright eyes and a warm smile. "Welcome, Aisha. I'm Linda Wei, your onboarding manager." Throughout the day, Aisha absorbed everything, company procedures, tasks, digital platforms she had never seen before. Her eyes moved quickly, taking notes, memorizing steps. She felt like a sponge, soaking up knowledge. Every new skill added a layer of confidence she hadn't known she possessed. During lunch, she sat alone until a colleague named Musa approached her with a friendly grin. "You're new?" he asked. "Yes," Aisha replied shyly. "Relax," Musa laughed. "Everyone is nervous on day one, but you'll fit right in. I can already tell." She smiled, small, genuine. The first genuine smile she had given anyone in a long time. As the weeks passed, Aisha grew into her role. She handled tasks, efficiently absorbed new systems quickly, and asked thoughtful questions. She never complained, never backed away from a challenge. When others struggled, she stayed late to help, earning quiet respect from the team. But what changed her most was her mentor, Madame Zuri. Zuri was everything Aisha aspired to become: elegant, assertive, wise, with a voice that commanded attention without raising volume. She saw Aisha's hunger for growth and began guiding her gently but firmly. One Friday afternoon, Zuri called Aisha into her office. "Sit," she said, smiling warmly. Aisha sat nervously, feeling like a student summoned by the headmistress. Zuri folded her hands. "Tell me, Aisha, what do you want, not what you think is safe? What do you truly want?" Aisha hesitated, but only briefly this time. "I want to lead," she said softly. "Someday," Zuri raised an eyebrow. "Someday isn't a plan. It's a wish. Leadership is built from intention, from clarity. So I'll ask again, what do you want?" Aisha swallowed, then whispered with trembling certainty. "I want to build a career where my voice matters. I want to prove to myself that I can stand on my own. I want to rise." Zuri smiled. "Good, because I've been watching you. You're capable of far more than you believe. Starting Monday, I'm placing you in the pilot training for our leadership development program." Aisha blinked in shock. "Me, but I've only been here 2 months. Yes, Zuri said. And in those 2 months, you've demonstrated integrity, discipline, initiative, and humility. Leadership isn't about how long you've been in a place. It's about what you do while you're there. Tears filled Aisha's eyes. She had spent her whole life being told she wasn't enough. And here was a woman of stature saying she was more than enough. That night she returned home, glowing with pride, a glow Jabari noticed instantly. "Why are you smiling like a schoolgirl?" he asked sharply as she walked in. But Aisha didn't answer. She didn't need his validation anymore. When she mentioned her leadership training, he scoffed loudly. "Leadership, you? Don't be foolish, Aisha. They're using you for cheap labor, that's all." But his words didn't pierce her this time. The armor she had been building layer by layer through self-belief and new achievements protected her now. She went to bed peacefully that night. Jabari lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, wondering when the woman he once controlled began slipping out of his grasp. He didn't realize it yet, but the version of Aisha he knew was gone forever. The new Aisha was rising, quietly, steadily, unstoppably, and soon her rise would reshape both of their destinies in ways he never imagined. Aisha's first months at MTech Commerce unfolded like a secret world blooming open for her. Every day she stepped into the glass building, she felt herself shedding the limits that had kept her small for so long. She walked faster, stood taller, and spoke with a confidence she had never known before. But even as she grew, she hid this transformation from Jabari, not because she feared him, but because she no longer needed his understanding or approval. Her progress belonged to her alone. The leadership training began on a Monday morning that would change the course of her life. Aisha entered the conference room, trembling slightly, notebook clutched to her chest. Inside were 10 participants, bright, sharp, young professionals with university degrees and experience she could only dream of. For a brief moment, she felt the old panic, "I don't belong here." But then Zuri walked in wearing her signature tailored suit and calm authority and gave Aisha a reassuring nod. That single nod reminded her she had earned her place. The training was rigorous. They learned about operations, strategy, team management, crisis response, digital marketing expansions, negotiation, and analytics. Aisha threw herself into every lesson. She arrived early, stayed late, and took notes so detailed they looked like manuscripts. She asked questions others overlooked. She stayed curious, absorbing everything like parched soil welcoming rain. One afternoon, the class was given a group task: develop a model for improving customer satisfaction ratings in underperforming regions. Aisha was grouped with 2 assertive men, Kwesi and Themba, who immediately took control of the discussion. They talked over her, debated loudly, and scribbled ideas on the board, while Aisha quietly wrote her own thoughts in her notebook. Near the end of the session, Zuri wandered by each table to evaluate progress. When she reached Aisha's group, the 2 men launched into a chaotic explanation of their half-formed solution. Zuri listened for a minute before looking at Aisha. "You haven't spoken," she said gently. "What's your view?" Aisha froze. Speaking up had never been easy for her, but this was why she was here. She took a breath, opened her notebook, and explained her idea: a personalized follow-up system using automated messages and human check-ins, combined with regional feedback loops and cultural tailoring of customer support. Her voice trembled at first but grew steadier as she saw Zuri's eyes light up with interest. When she finished, the room fell silent. Zuri nodded slowly. "That," she said, "is a strategy with depth. Well done." Kwesi and Themba stared at her, stunned and slightly embarrassed. Aisha lowered her gaze, but a quiet pride warmed her chest. From that day forward, the dynamic changed. Her colleagues listened when she spoke. They asked her opinion. They treated her not as the quiet newcomer, but as an equal. Aisha found herself adjusting to a new identity, someone capable, someone respected. Meanwhile, at home, Jabari grew increasingly irritable. He didn't understand the glow on her face. He didn't understand why she came home late. He didn't understand why she smiled at her phone while reading work updates. To him, her happiness was suspicious. "What exactly do they have you doing at that company?" he demanded one evening as she reheated leftover stew. "Working," she answered simply. "I mean specifically, Aisha. Don't be coy." "I'm learning," she replied. "Growing?" Jabari scoffed. "You think you're too good for this house now, too good for me." "No," she said calmly. "I think I'm finally good enough for myself." He fell silent, caught off guard by her honesty. Something inside him churned and spat: jealousy, fear, wounded pride. He masked it with irritation. "Well, don't forget your duties here," he muttered. "A job doesn't change the fact that you're my wife." But marriage, Aisha realized, didn't mean losing herself. Not anymore. At work, her dedication paid off quickly. Mtech was preparing for a major expansion into regional digital markets, and Zuri needed a small team to assist with researching user behavior and logistics. To everyone's surprise, including Aisha's, Zuri chose her. "I see something in you that you don't see yet," Zuri told her after the announcement. "You learn fast, you think deeply, and you know how to navigate adversity. That's leadership." Aisha's throat tightened with emotion. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Working directly with Zuri was intense. The woman was brilliant, demanding, exacting, and relentless in her pursuit of excellence. But she was also kind. Aisha admired her deeply, absorbing not just skills but strength from her. Through the project, Aisha learned to handle spreadsheets with complex formulas, analyze market patterns, prepare presentations, and manage timelines. She practiced speaking clearly, presenting confidently, and defending her ideas when challenged. One night, as she prepared a slide deck on regional market behaviors, she realized she wasn't just learning to work, she was learning to lead. The transformation inside her was no longer subtle, it was blooming. Weeks turned into months, and Aisha's name began circulating within the company. Supervisors praised her work ethic, co-workers described her as dependable. Zuri openly mentioned her potential in meetings. Even the CEO once approached her in the hallway saying he had heard promising things. Aisha felt herself expanding beyond the limits life had placed around her. Jabari, however, was unraveling. His business investments had been rocky for months, and now the cracks were widening. He made risky decisions based on pride instead of logic. A few deals collapsed. Angry investors called at odd hours. Jabari paced constantly, snapping at everyone, slamming doors, his confidence crumbling. He came home furious one night and found Aisha typing on her laptop. Working again, he sneered. "What could you possibly be doing that's so important?" Aisha paused, met his gaze, and said quietly, "Something that matters to me." Her calmness infuriated him because he couldn't shake her anymore. Jabari needed control to feel powerful, and Aisha no longer slipped into the role he had carved for her. The imbalance terrified him. He tried different tactics, complaining about dinner, guilt-tripping her for being absent, accusing her of abandoning her duties. But the more he pushed, the more she resisted, not with anger, but with unshakable peace. A peace he could not break. One Sunday morning, he confronted her again, unable to hold back his frustration. "You're changing, Aisha, and not in a good way." She looked up from her cup of tea. "I'm changing because I'm finally seeing myself clearly." "I don't like who you're becoming," she smiled softly. "That's because you never truly saw who I could become." The truth of her words hit him like a slap. Later that week, Aisha delivered her first major presentation to the senior team. She stood at the front of the glass conference room, hands slightly trembling, but her voice steady. She spoke with clarity, breaking down data, explaining patterns, offering solutions. When she finished, the room erupted in nods and murmurs of approval. Zuri smiled proudly. "Excellent work, Aisha." Those words felt like a crown placed gently on her head. That night, as she lay in bed next to the man who once told her she was nothing, Aisha realized something profound. She didn't need Jabari's validation. She didn't need his approval. She didn't need his permission to exist. She was becoming her own person. And this transformation, slow, steady, unstoppable, would soon take her further than either of them imagined. She was rising. And she was only getting started. Aisha's rise inside Mtech Commerce continued at a pace that even she struggled to comprehend. Each day introduced her to new skills, new challenges, and new layers of confidence she had never known she could possess. Yet the more she grew, the more tension brewed at home. Jabari's world was collapsing, and he was beginning to sense that his wife was slipping out of his control. One morning, as she stepped into the office wearing a neatly pressed shirt and her hair pulled back, Musa greeted her with an excited grin. "You're on the list," he whispered, waving a printed memo. "What list?" she asked cautiously. "The one for project expansion candidates." "Zuri submitted your name." Her heart skipped. Only 5 people were chosen. The project, a major digital expansion into multiple regions, was the most anticipated initiative of the year. The team chosen for it would be closely observed by the executive board, and those who excelled often received promotions. Aisha felt the breath catch in her chest. She tried to steady her voice. "Are you sure?" Musa nodded. "Positive. You deserve it. Everyone sees how hard you work." His words filled her with warmth. Warmth she had never received in her own home. The project launched with an all-staff meeting in the main auditorium. The CEO, a tall man with a calm, authoritative presence, addressed the room with excitement. "We're entering a new era of innovation," he said, and we're relying on our brightest minds to lead the charge. When he read the names of the chosen team members, Aisha held her breath and then heard it. Aisha Kamboulé. Her heart soared. The room applauded. Zuri glanced her way with a proud nod. Aisha felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them away quickly. She didn't want anyone to see the depth of her emotions, the years of belittling, the buried dreams, the silent battles, the quiet victories, all culminating in this moment. After the meeting, Zuri approached her. "You earned this," she said softly. "Now it's time to show them who you really are." Aisha smiled, radiant, grateful, and determined. The work was intense. For 2 months, the team met daily to analyze regional behaviors, map out logistics, research competitors, and design a multi-phase rollout strategy. Aisha was responsible for overseeing customer engagement models, a task that required creativity, precision, and deep understanding of the company's diverse user base. She worked tirelessly, late nights, early mornings, long weekends filled with research and planning. But unlike the exhausting labor she once performed to survive, this work felt liberating, invigorating. It was the kind of challenge that stirred her soul. But at home, the atmosphere could not have been more different. Jabari's business was taking hit after hit. 2 investors withdrew. A shipment arrived damaged. A partner threatened to sue. Bills piled up. The confident man who once strutted with pride had begun pacing anxiously, snapping at every small inconvenience. He could not understand why Aisha seemed to be thriving while he was sinking. "You're working too much," he said one evening as she typed on her laptop. "I'm doing what I need to do," she replied. "You're abandoning your responsibilities at home." She paused. "This home has 2 adults, Jabari. Responsibilities shouldn't fall on just one." His face hardened. "Are you lecturing me? I'm stating a fact," she said. "I'm no longer the woman who carries everything alone while you live, as if the world revolves around you." Her voice was calm but firm. Jabari felt it like a blow. The arguments grew more frequent. He accused her of disrespect. She refused to shrink. He demanded she prioritize him. She prioritized her future. He tried to guilt her into quitting. She ignored him. Every step she took toward independence felt like a threat to his fragile sense of power. Then came the night everything changed. Aisha was preparing a slide deck for the final project pitch, a crucial presentation that could determine the expansion's approval. Her laptop was open on the dining table, papers scattered around her mind, fully immersed in strategy and analysis. Jabari entered the room silent and tense. He watched her work for a moment, then asked, "So this is more important than me now. This is important to me," she said simply. He scoffed, pacing. "You're nothing without me, Aisha. I gave you everything." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "No, Jabari, you gave me a life you controlled, and I allowed it because I didn't know my worth. But now I do." Her voice trembled, not with fear but with clarity. Jabari's expression twisted. For years he had been the sun in their relationship, and she the quiet orbit. Now she was breaking free from his gravity, and he didn't know how to handle it. He raised his voice. "You're forgetting your place," Aisha stood up slowly. "My place is wherever I choose to stand, not where you push me to be." It was the first time she had openly challenged him with such strength. Jabari froze, stunned. She took a deep breath. "I am done living small so you can feel big." Then she sat back down and continued working, ignoring the storm of emotions on his face, ignoring the wounded ego, ignoring the fear he was trying to impose. She had crossed the invisible line he thought would always bind her. The next morning, she delivered the final pitch to the executive board. Her voice was steady, her posture confident, her strategy thorough and innovative. She spoke with a balance of humility and authority that captivated everyone in the room. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, then applause. The CEO leaned forward. "Impressive work, Miss Kamboulé. This is exactly the direction we need." Zuri's smile could have lit the whole building. Hours later, the official announcement came. The expansion was approved, and Aisha's name was listed as one of the project leaders. Her colleagues celebrated. Messages poured in. Musa brought cake. Zuri hugged her tightly. "Aisha," she whispered, "your life is changing. Embrace it fully." That night, Aisha walked home beneath a sky glittering with stars. She felt lighter than she had in years, as though the universe itself was opening new doors for her. But she did not know that on the other side of her growing success, Jabari was preparing for the darkest season of his life. His downfall had started. And soon Aisha's rise would become the very thing that exposed how deeply his world was beginning to crumble. She was ascending toward a destiny neither of them could yet imagine. Jabari Moyo had built his identity around one idea, that he was a man destined to rise above everyone around him. For years, that belief held strong. His confidence, his charisma, his boldness in business all seemed to confirm the narrative he told himself. He was powerful, indispensable, untouchable. But when things began to fall apart, it didn't happen all at once. It started with small cracks, an overlooked invoice, a delayed payment, a supplier that grew impatient. At first, Jabari brushed them off, believing he could talk his way out of anything. But misfortune has a way of spiraling when pride refuses to step aside. The first major blow landed when an investor named Karambe pulled out of their joint venture without warning. Jabari received the call on a Thursday afternoon. He had been boasting to his friends about upcoming profits when his phone buzzed. Moments later, his expression collapsed. "What do you mean you're withdrawing?" Jabari demanded, pacing the room. "We had an agreement. I can't pour more money into a sinking ship," Karambe said coldly. 3 delayed shipments, 2 failed audits, and your mismanagement is catching up to you. "Mismanagement," Jabari nearly shouted. "I'm doing everything myself because no one else is competent." "That's exactly the problem," the investor snapped. "You refuse help, you refuse advice, you refuse accountability. I'm done." The call ended. Jabari stood frozen, his phone still pressed to his ear, his pride wounded beyond comprehension. That night, he didn't tell Aisha. He spent hours in the living room staring at empty bottles, muttering to himself. Meanwhile, Aisha worked quietly on her project documents in the bedroom, unaware of the storm brewing outside her door. She had learned to create her own world inside that small room. A world where her dreams mattered, where her voice didn't drown beneath someone else's ego. She no longer listened for Jabari's footsteps, no longer shrank when she heard his sighs. His chaos had become background noise to her growth, but Jabari could feel her slipping away. As his business problems worsened, his frustration fed into an obsession with regaining control. Not control over his failing financial life, he couldn't face that, but over Aisha, the one person he felt entitled to command, he began questioning her every move. "Why are you leaving so early? Who were you talking to on your lunch break? Why did your manager message you after work hours? Why are you smiling when you look at your phone?" And every time Aisha answered with calm clarity, her voice no longer bending for his insecurity. "I'm leaving early for work because I have responsibilities. I talk to colleagues because we collaborate. My manager messages me because I'm trusted with major tasks, and I smile because I'm proud of myself." Her responses, gentle but firm, chipped away at Jabari's dominance. The more secure Aisha became, the more fragile he felt. It was a cruel mirror, one he couldn't escape. One afternoon, Jabari returned home earlier than usual, sweat beading on his forehead. He had received another devastating email. One of his distributors was canceling their contract after finding more inconsistencies in the inventory reports. Jabari knew they were right, but pride kept him blind. He barged into the bedroom to find Aisha reading an article on global e-commerce systems. "You're studying again," he said bitterly. "For what? So you can act smarter than me?" Aisha closed her laptop gently. "I'm studying because I want to improve. Because I want more for my life." "Oh, so now you think your life is bigger than this marriage?" Aisha held his gaze. "My life is allowed to grow, Jabari." He shook his head in disbelief. "You're behaving like you're better than me." "I'm behaving like someone who finally sees her worth." Her words hit him like a punch. He stormed out of the room, unable to face the truth. His downfall had nothing to do with her success, but he couldn't accept that. In his mind, everything began to blur together. His failures, her growth, his shame, her confidence. It all felt like a threat to the image he had spent years constructing. Over the following weeks, the situation worsened. 2 creditors demanded immediate repayment. A supplier threatened legal action. His employees grew anxious. Rumors began spreading among business circles about his incompetence. He tried to hide it from Aisha. He pretended nothing was wrong, forcing fake smiles, making grand promises. But Aisha had learned to see through him long ago. One evening, she found him sitting in the dark, head buried in his hands. "Jabari," she said softly. He didn't look up. "Everything is falling apart," he whispered, voice trembling. "Everything I built, gone." Aisha had every reason to feel cold toward him. This was the man who belittled her, dismissed her, mocked her, controlled her. The man who told her she was nothing, but compassion was woven into her soul. She couldn't watch someone suffer, not even him. She sat beside him. "You can rebuild," she said gently, "but only if you let go of pride. You don't have to carry everything alone." He finally looked at her, eyes red. "And what? Let you carry things now. Let you be the strong one," Aisha blinked. Why is that wrong? Because I'm the man, he snapped, slamming his fist against the couch. Aisha's eyes narrowed slightly. She stood. Strength doesn't belong to one gender, Jabari. It belongs to those who choose to grow. He fell silent. Aisha walked toward the door, then paused. You are not losing everything because I'm rising. You're losing everything because you refuse to rise with me. The truth lingered long after she left the room. Days later, Jabari's business collapsed fully. The final blow came from the bank, freezing his accounts due to unpaid debts. His office shut down, his employees scattered, his reputation crumbled. For the first time in his life, Jabari felt powerless. He sat alone in a quiet apartment, surrounded by overdue bills and broken pride. And while Aisha didn't gloat, she no longer offered to fix his world. She had learned that saving someone who refuses to grow is a losing battle. But the shock that awaited him would cut deeper than any financial ruin. Because while he was falling, Aisha was rising higher than he could have ever imagined. Her promotion was coming. Her influence was growing. Her name was on the lips of senior executives. Soon she would stand in a position he had never dreamed she could reach. And one day, he would walk into an office seeking help, only to see the woman he once belittled sitting at the head of the table. The shift of power had already begun. He just didn't know how far it would go. Aisha woke before sunrise, as she often did now, not out of obligation, but out of purpose. The quiet hours of the morning had become her sanctuary, a space where she could focus, reflect, and prepare herself for the world she was building. She stood by the window with a cup of warm tea, watching the sky shift from indigo to soft gold. Each new dawn felt like a reminder she was not the same woman she once was. She had grown past the confines of her old life, and there was no turning back. At MTech Commerce, the excitement around the expansion project continued to rise. News traveled fast. Investors, regional managers, and board members were all watching the initiative closely. It was the largest growth plan the company had undertaken in 5 years, and success would not only elevate the company, it would elevate everyone involved. By the third month of the project, Aisha had proven herself invaluable. Her insights were sharp, her work meticulous, and her leadership natural. She coordinated teams across departments, facilitated discussions, and presented ideas with a clarity even senior managers struggled to match. Zuri trusted her completely and delegated more responsibilities to her than to anyone else on the team. One afternoon, Zuri called her into her glass office overlooking the city. Aisha entered holding her notebook, hopeful yet nervous. Aisha, Zuri began with a smile. I have news. The board reviewed your work on the customer engagement model. Aisha's heart thumped. She clasped her hands tightly. They were impressed, Zuri continued, so much so that they want to use your framework as the foundation for the entire regional rollout. Aisha's breath caught. My framework, yes, Zuri said proudly. Your analysis was thorough, your strategy was adaptable, and your projections were accurate. You've demonstrated a level of insight that's rare even among seasoned professionals. Emotion swelled in Aisha's chest so strong, it made her eyes glisten. You deserve this recognition, Zuri added. And that's not all. The board wants to appoint a project lead to oversee the next phase. I've recommended you. Aisha stared at her, stunned. Me. But there are people with far more experience. Zuri shook her head. Experience is only valuable when paired with talent, and you have both. Leadership is about ability, not age. Trust me, you're ready. Those words settled over Aisha like a blessing. Take tonight to think about it, Zuri said gently, but I already know your answer. When Aisha left the office, her steps felt lighter than air. Musa spotted her and immediately noticed her glow. You got good news, didn't you? He asked with a playful grin. Aisha laughed softly. Something like that. Her phone buzzed with messages from colleagues congratulating her. They had somehow heard through the internal grapevine. Compliments flooded in, and for once, Aisha didn't shrink from them. She accepted the praise with gratitude and strength. But back home, things were unraveling at a vicious pace. Jabari had been avoiding everyone, friends, business partners, even his own family. Shame gnawed at him. Failure wrapped itself around his neck like an iron collar. He spent hours staring at bankruptcy notices, unpaid bills, legal warnings. His accounts were nearly dry, and he had sold several pieces of furniture to pay off emergency loans. The life he once flaunted was evaporating. Worse, he felt increasingly invisible, especially to Aisha. The wife who once hovered around him, cushioning his ego, was now busy, focused, self-assured. She no longer asked for permission to breathe. She no longer hung on to his opinions. She no longer looked at him with the timid admiration he used to feed on, and that loss above all burned him. One evening, when Aisha walked through the door carrying a stack of work documents, Jabari approached her, his eyes bloodshot from exhaustion and frustration. "We need to talk," he said. Aisha set down her bag carefully. "What is it I've been thinking?" he began, pacing anxiously. "With everything falling apart, maybe you should quit your job." Aisha blinked. "Quit, yes," he insisted, his voice growing louder. "You're too busy now. Always working, always tired, always distracted. You barely pay attention to me anymore. This marriage is suffering." "This marriage," Aisha replied calmly, "has been suffering for a long time." "Because of your job," he snapped. "No," she said quietly. "Because you never wanted me to grow." Jabari froze as if struck. Aisha continued, her tone steady. "I supported you for years. I stood by you, believed in you, protected your ego, and carried burdens you never saw. And the moment I started believing in myself, you saw it as a threat." "That's not true," he muttered, but the lie hung limp in the air. Aisha stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not quitting, Jabari. I'm rising. And if that intimidates you, then perhaps the problem isn't my growth, but your insecurity." His face twisted with anger and helplessness. He wanted to shout, he wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Deep down he knew she was right. That night Jabari slept on the couch, stewing in resentment. Aisha went to bed alone, the quiet room feeling more peaceful than it had in years. The next morning she accepted Zuri's offer to lead the next phase of the expansion. The official announcement came in an email sent to the entire company: project lead appointment, regional digital expansion. Appointed lead Aisha. Kambul applause erupted across the office floor when she walked in. Colleagues congratulated her. Her team decorated her desk with small balloons. The CEO even stopped by to shake her hand. "Africa will speak your name one day," he said warmly. "Keep going." Aisha felt tears prick her eyes. She bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, sir." That same afternoon, Zuri invited her to a high-level meeting with division heads. It was the kind of meeting she never imagined she would attend, where strategies were shaped, budgets discussed, and major decisions made. Aisha contributed confidently, her voice steady as she presented her projections. Senior managers nodded in approval. One of them even said, "We should put her on the fast track to executive training." Her future was unfolding faster than she could process. But the universe was not done shifting. Later that week, a confidential memo circulated within upper management. MTech was considering acquiring several small companies to expand its digital infrastructure. One of those companies, a failing logistics firm, belonged to Jabari. Aisha didn't know it yet, but soon her professional rise would cross paths with Jabari's downfall, in the most unexpected way. She was rising to heights she had never dreamed possible. He was sinking to depths he never thought he'd reach. And destiny was quietly aligning their paths for a dramatic reversal neither of them could foresee. A reversal that would leave Jabari speechless, because the woman he once mocked would soon be in a position he could never have imagined. The fracture in their marriage deepened with each passing day, and though neither of them said it out loud, something fundamental had shifted permanently. For Aisha, the shift felt like stepping out of a dim corridor into a space filled with light. For Jabari, it felt like tumbling into darkness with no foothold to stop his fall. Aisha had barely slept the night after her promotion was announced. She lay awake thinking not of the challenges ahead, but of how far she had already come. She remembered the girl she once was, quiet, hesitant, unsure of her worth. She remembered the woman she became, obedient, careful, trying desperately to avoid conflict with a husband whose pride consumed the air around them. And now she was someone else entirely, someone she actually liked, someone she respected, someone strong. But as her sense of self grew stronger, the fragile shell of her marriage crumbled faster. One Friday evening, as she returned home from a late strategy meeting, she found Jabari sitting on the couch surrounded by paperwork. He looked disheveled, hair, uncombed shirt, wrinkled eyes, puffy with exhaustion. Bills, legal notices, and bank statements lay scattered like fallen leaves around him. He lifted his head slowly when she entered. "You're late," he muttered. "I had a meeting," she said calmly. "Of course you did." He picked up a document, tossed it aside, then blurted, "You don't care about this marriage anymore." Aisha took off her shoes, carefully, unbothered by the accusation. "I care about myself," she replied softly. For once, he recoiled as if her words had struck him physically. "So that's it. You're done with me. You're too good for me now." Aisha sighed. "Jabari, this isn't about being too good. It's about survival. I was losing myself. And now you want to leave me? His voice cracked not out of love but fear. Aisha hesitated, then spoke with clarity. I want space. I want peace. And I want to stand in a life that doesn't crush me. Jabari stared at her with wild disbelief. He had always assumed she would stay no matter what, that she was his constant, his shadow, his possession. The thought of her walking away terrified him more than any debt or business failure. This can't be happening, he whispered. Aisha, please. I need you. She swallowed hard. You need someone to hold your world together, but that someone can't always be me. Later that night, after he had fallen asleep in a chair, worn down by stress and fear, Aisha quietly began packing a small suitcase. She moved silently, folding shirts and trousers with trembling hands. She wasn't leaving because she no longer cared. She was leaving because staying was killing her spirit. Before dawn, she left the house with her suitcase, closing the door gently behind her. She moved into a small apartment near the company, the kind of place she used to dream about when she was younger. It wasn't luxury, but it was hers, her space, her freedom. The first morning she woke in that apartment, sunlight filtered through soft curtains, and she realized for the first time in years, she felt safe. Work became her anchor in this new chapter. Every day, she stepped into MTech with renewed energy. Her leadership responsibilities grew heavier, but she carried them with quiet dignity. The team respected her. The board watched her closely. Zuri guided her like a mother guiding a daughter into a brighter world. But the more Aisha blossomed, the more Jabari withered. After she left, his world collapsed at dizzying speed. Investors demanded repayment. Suppliers refused to work with him. His office lease was terminated. His reputation, once spoken of with admiration, began to crumble under whispers of mismanagement and incompetence. He called Aisha repeatedly that first week. She answered the calls, but only briefly. Aisha, please come home. I need you. Jabari, you need financial discipline and humility, not me. Everything is falling apart, then rebuild it, she said gently, but I can't rebuild it for you. Her voice remained calm but firm. She no longer spoke from a place of fear or obligation. She spoke from a place of self-worth. Eventually, the calls stopped. Jabari was too consumed by crisis to chase her. His downfall was absolute. Within 2 months, Jabari's business officially declared insolvency. Courts seized office equipment. Debt collectors visited his home. Friends stopped answering his calls. He became a shadow of the man he once projected himself to be. One afternoon, Aisha received a message from him. I lost everything. She stared at the text for a long time. There was a time when this would have shattered her, a time when she would have rushed to fix Comfort Rescue. But now she knew the truth. Jabari's downfall was not her responsibility. It was the consequence of choices he refused to evaluate. She typed a short but kind reply. I'm sorry. I hope this helps you find humility. Then she put her phone away and returned to her work. Her life was not meant to be spent holding together a man who refused to grow. As Aisha continued to flourish at MTech, Zuri began preparing a surprising recommendation. During a quarterly review with the board, Zuri spoke confidently. For our next division expansion, I recommend appointing Aisha as interim operations director. The board members exchanged curious glances. Is she ready for that level? One asked. She's more ready than half the people already in that position, Zuri replied. She has talent, resilience, strategic thinking, and emotional intelligence. She sees solutions where others see obstacles. The CEO nodded slowly. I've seen her presentations. They're excellent. Another board member chimed in. And we do need more women in leadership. The motion passed unanimously. Aisha didn't know it yet, but her name had now entered the sphere of upper management discussions. Just 3 weeks later, an opportunity arose that would change her life forever. MTech scheduled the acquisition of several failing logistics companies to strengthen their infrastructure. One of those companies, identified by code only, was undergoing severe financial collapse and legal disputes. Aisha sat in the meeting room as the acquisition team presented details. Company 6B, the presenter said, is in critical condition but offers valuable distribution routes. We recommend immediate acquisition. Aisha flipped through the documents. Her breath froze. The logo, the address, the financial summary, the CEO's name, Jabari Moyo. Her heart thundered in her chest. She stared at the papers, unable to speak. Zuri noticed her stillness and leaned in quietly. Is something wrong? Aisha swallowed, voice barely above a whisper. I know this company. Zuri raised an eyebrow. How well? Aisha hesitated. Better than you think. Her mentor studied her carefully, reading the layers of pain behind her words. Do you want to step out? Aisha shook her head slowly. No. I need to stay. The acquisition moved forward quickly. The final signing was scheduled for the following week. When the deal closed, Emtech became the new owner of Jabari's failed business, and Aisha, as interim operations director, was assigned direct oversight. The irony, the poetry, the justice of it all sank into her slowly. She did not celebrate, she did not gloat, she simply inhaled deeply and whispered to herself, "This is my path." Life had brought her full circle, and Jabari had no idea what was coming. The signing of the acquisition contract felt surreal to Aisha. As she sat at the long conference table beside senior executives, her hands rested calmly on the binder, but her heartbeat thudded like distant drums. She watched Zuri flip through the final documents with professional ease, listen as lawyers exchanged formalities, and observe the board members speak with excitement about expansion opportunities. Everything looked so polished, so orderly, so monumental, and yet all she could think about was the name printed on the first page of Company 6B's financial report. Jabari Moyo, founder and CEO. Status insolvent. She traced the letters with her eyes not out of malice, but disbelief. Life had a cruel way of weaving irony into destiny. The company Jabari once bragged about, the empire he claimed set him above her now, lay in ruins, and she was one of the people stepping in to rebuild the pieces he had broken. But Aisha did not harbor vengeance. She felt no pleasure in his downfall. Only a strange, heavy kind of clarity. Jabari's failure had nothing to do with her success. Their roads had diverged long before she realized she needed to walk her own. When the final page was signed, the CEO extended a hand toward her. Aisha, you'll oversee the integration of this acquisition, he said with a tone of full confidence. We trust your judgment. Your leadership will determine how quickly this operation stabilizes. Aisha nodded, humbled but ready. I'll give it everything I have. Zuri smiled, pride gleaming in her eyes. You've earned this, Aisha. Later that day, Aisha returned to her small apartment. She removed her heels, loosened her hair, and stood before the mirror for a long time. Not to admire her reflection, but to understand it. The woman staring back at her looked powerful. Not because of titles or achievements, but because she had rebuilt herself piece by piece. Yet beneath that strength was a quiet dread. To complete the integration, she would have to visit the failing logistics company. The one Jabari once poured everything into. The one he used to boast about relentlessly. The one he now pretended didn't exist. She lay awake for hours that night thinking, would he be there? Would he be angry? Would he be humiliated? Would he understand? This wasn't revenge. She didn't know. Asterisk, asterisk. The next week, Aisha arrived at the gates of Moyo Logistics, or what remained of it. The company warehouse looked abandoned, half the windows cracked, the sign faded and crooked. The parking lot was almost empty, save for a few broken-down trucks, and 2 employees sitting on crates, their faces tired with uncertainty. When Aisha stepped out of the company SUV, the employees glanced up curious. Are you from Emtech? One of them asked, standing. Yes, Aisha said gently. I'm here to oversee the transition. The men exchanged relieved looks. Thank God, the older one said. We thought we were all finished. You're not, she assured them. We're here to rebuild. As she toured the warehouse, the magnitude of the collapse became painfully clear. Inventory was scattered, paperwork, incomplete systems, outdated, and morale non-existent. Jabari had not just failed, he had abandoned the entire operation in its final days. One employee led her to a storage office. This was the CEO's office, he said. Aisha paused at the doorway, staring at the cluttered desk, the dusty awards, the framed photo of Jabari shaking hands with a former investor. It was like walking into a memory she had never asked for. She entered slowly, touching nothing, absorbing everything. It struck her then how desperately Jabari had tried to mask his insecurities with ambition. He had built a house of cards and refused to let anyone steady it. Not even her. She closed the door quietly behind her. Asterisk, asterisk. Meanwhile, Jabari was spiraling. His pride wouldn't allow him to tell anyone the truth. He claimed he was taking a break from business, that he was restructuring, that he needed time to reflect. But the people around him were not blind. They saw the fear in his eyes, the tremble in his hands, the desperation with which he clung to the illusion of control. He hadn't spoken to Aisha since she moved out, partly out of shame, partly out of confusion. He didn't know who he was without her steady presence, without her patience, without her quiet sacrifices. One afternoon, he received a message from his former operations clerk. Sir, the new management is here. MTech just took over. Jabari's breath caught. Already he texted back. Yes, they sent someone today. A woman. He froze. A woman. Someone experienced. Someone who would see the mess he left behind. Humiliation pressed on his chest like a weight. He rushed to put on the most respectable clothes. He still had a shirt that was less wrinkled than the other's trousers that hadn't lost their button, and hurried to the warehouse. As he approached the building, he saw employees gathered near the entrance watching someone speak. He slowed his pace, heart pounding. Who was this woman? What would she think of him? Would she humiliate him in front of his own employees? He stepped closer. The employees parted slightly, and then he saw her. Aisha, his wife. The woman he belittled. The woman he mocked. The woman he told would be nothing without him. Standing at the center of the warehouse, confident, composed, authoritative. Talking to his employees with a dignity he had never shown them. For a moment, the world stopped. Aisha noticed him only when the room fell quiet. She turned slowly. Their eyes met. Shock, guilt, recognition, and something deeper, something painful passed through Jabari's face. Aisha remained still, her posture dignified, her expression unreadable. He opened his mouth, but no sound escaped. She took a calm breath. We'll continue this discussion shortly, she told the employees. They walked away, leaving the former couple standing alone in the center of the warehouse that symbolized Jabari's defeat and Aisha's rise. Jabari swallowed hard. Aisha, what are you doing here? She met his gaze with quiet strength. I'm managing the transition of this acquisition. Acquisition, his voice cracked. Yes, she said gently. MTech bought the company. He stared at her in disbelief. And you're the one overseeing it. Yes. His knees nearly buckled. This was the moment he had feared without knowing it. His nightmare and his reckoning all in one. You're my new boss, he whispered. Aisha held his gaze soft, steady, unwavering. I am, she said. Jabari's face crumpled. He looked away, shame burning his skin. Aisha, I'm sorry, he choked out. For everything. I failed. I failed you. I failed myself. She didn't move closer. She didn't look away. Failure isn't the end, Jabari, she said softly, but arrogance can be. He lifted his eyes, tears forming. What happens now? Aisha inhaled deeply. The future stretched before them not as husband and wife, but as two people standing at the crossroads of what they had created and what they had destroyed. What happens now, she said, depends on whether you're ready to learn. The warehouse remained quiet, the air thick with the weight of unspoken truths. And for the first time, Jabari saw her clearly, not as the woman he tried to control, but as the woman he could never keep from rising. The silence between them stretched for several long seconds, heavy, fragile, almost sacred. Jabari stood there, the remnants of his pride scattered at his feet, while Aisha stood rooted in calm authority. The warehouse air smelled of dust, old pallets, and faded ambition. Somewhere in the distance, a forklift beeped faintly, but in that moment it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. Jabari's eyes glistened with something Aisha had never seen on his face before. Not arrogance, not frustration, not superiority. Humility. Raw, unfamiliar humility. Aisha, I never imagined this, he whispered, voice cracking. You, leading my company. Aisha held his gaze steadily. Your former company, she corrected gently. MTech owns it now. We're here to rebuild what's left. He flinched, but he nodded. Yes, of course. For a moment, he seemed unsure of how to stand, where to look, what to do with his hands. He had always thrived on certainty, on being the loudest voice in the room. But now, stripped of his status, his wealth, and his ego's armor, he looked like a man searching for solid ground. I thought I was unstoppable, he murmured almost to himself. I thought nothing could touch me. Not business loss. Not debt. Not even losing you. Aisha felt a flicker of something, not pity but empathy. Pain had carved new lines into Jabari's face, softened his sharp edges. She didn't excuse his past behavior, but she recognized the humanity in his downfall. Everyone falls, she said gently, but not everyone learns. He looked at her with wide, desperate eyes. And you? Do you think I can learn? Aisha paused before answering. She needed him to hear the truth, not a comforting lie. You can, she said softly. But only if you stop blaming the world for your failures. Only if you look inward, not outward. Jabari exhaled shakily, his shoulders slumping. I've been a fool. I treated you like you were beneath me. I pushed you down so I could feel tall. His voice broke. And now you're standing taller than I ever have. Aisha's heart tightened. She did not take pleasure in his pain, but she also did not deny how far she had come. Her strength had been forged in silence, in endurance, in self-discovery. She had earned every step of her ascent. Jabari, she said, I didn't rise to spite you. I rose because I finally believed I deserved to. He swallowed hard. And I never believed you could rise at all. I never gave you credit. I never supported you. I became the person I swore I'd never be, my father's shadow. This caught Aisha's attention. She softened slightly. Your father's shadow. Jabari nodded slowly. He controlled everything. Everyone. Loved only when we obeyed. Respected only when we agreed. And I hated him for it. He closed his eyes. But I became him, without even realizing it. Aisha watched him carefully. This was the first time he had spoken openly about the roots of his behavior. You can break that cycle, she said quietly. But you must choose to. He opened his eyes again, full of turmoil. I want to change, Aisha. I want to be different, better, not for business, not for pride. For me? She nodded slowly. That's a start. But then he asked the question she hoped he wouldn't. And for us, is there still an us? The question hung in the air like a fragile thread that might snap with the wrong word. Aisha's expression softened, but not with romantic hope, rather with clarity. Truth. Jabari? I don't know. His face fell. I care about you, she said gently. But caring isn't enough to fix what broke. You hurt me in ways I didn't even recognize until I left. I know, he whispered. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Aisha. She felt the weight of his sincerity. But she also felt the weight of the years she had lost, believing she was small. So right now, she continued, what I can offer you isn't the promise of reconciliation. What I can offer is honesty, respect, and professionalism. Because in this place, she gestured gently to the warehouse. I am your director. Jabari bowed his head. I understand. Asterisk. Over the next week, Aisha observed the company with a precise professional eye. She conducted staff interviews, reviewed financial losses, assessed equipment needs, and created plans for restructuring. Her leadership was firm but fair, compassionate yet efficient. Jabari kept his distance at first. He watched from corners, sat silently in meetings, and remained respectful. For the first time, he was learning to listen more than he spoke. But something else was happening too. He began to see Aisha not as his wife, not as the woman he once tried to control, but as a leader, a force, a person with a mind sharper than he had ever acknowledged. Several days later, Aisha sat with a group of employees discussing new workflow strategies. Jabari lingered near the doorway, observing as she outlined solutions with calm authority. His eyes filled with a mixture of awe, guilt, and something else, admiration. Pure admiration untainted by ego. After the meeting, he approached her cautiously. Aisha, he said, clearing his throat, can I talk to you? Not as your past and not as your burden, but as someone trying to be better. She nodded. Yes, he swallowed. I want to work here, under you, and learn, if you'll allow it. Aisha looked at him for a long moment. The idea was emotionally complicated but professionally logical. He knew the infrastructure. He knew the suppliers. He knew the routes. And maybe this was the only path through which he could rebuild himself honestly. Are you ready to take a position you once considered beneath you, she asked. Yes, he said, without hesitation. I'm ready to start from the bottom, truly. She studied him, his posture, his sincerity, his humility. She could see he meant it. Then she nodded. Very well. There's an entry-level logistics coordinator opening. You can start there. Jabari blinked. It was the lowest paid position in the department. The job he once mocked as unskilled labor. But he straightened his shoulders. I accept. And Jabari, she added softly, I won't treat you differently than the others. He nodded. That's exactly what I need. Asterisk. On his first day, something extraordinary happened. The same employees who once feared his temper now watched him humbly stack inventory, organize records, and take instructions from supervisors he used to dismiss. Aisha passed by briefly that morning, clipboard in hand, and their eyes met just for a second. The look they shared was not romantic, not painful, not full of tension. It was the look of two people finally standing as equals. Her rise had forced him to confront himself. His downfall had opened space for transformation. And this This strange, unexpected shift was the beginning of something new for them both. Not reconciliation, not revenge, but rediscovery. Each on their own path, each changing in ways neither had expected. And life in its quiet wisdom was far from finished shaping what would happen next. The days that followed marked a strange new chapter, one neither of them could have predicted. Aisha stepped fully into her role as interim operations director, guiding the transition of the newly acquired logistics division with precision and grace. Jabari, meanwhile, began the humbling work of rebuilding himself from the ground up, carrying boxes, updating inventory logs, and learning to take instructions from people who once feared him. Yet every day there was an unspoken awareness between them. Aisha felt it when she passed through the warehouse floors, her heels clicking against the concrete while employees straightened instinctively. She would catch glimpses of Jabari scanning documents or lifting crates, his posture smaller, movements quieter. He did not avoid her, but he did not seek her out either. He was learning to exist without demanding attention. For the first time in their lives together, their dynamic was not built on power, fear, or ego. It was built on distance, respect, and the slow unraveling of past wounds. One afternoon, Aisha gathered all department supervisors for a progress review. As she spoke, her voice confident and clear, Jabari lingered in the back of the room, taking notes like every other coordinator. She outlined new workflow changes and performance targets. Her strategy was bold but realistic, demanding yet fair. When she finished, one supervisor raised a hand. "Director Kambule, what are our immediate KPIs for the next quarter?" Aisha replied smoothly. "Efficiency increased by 15%, error reduction by 10, and full integration of MTech reporting systems. I expect weekly updates from each of you." Her eyes scanned the room, landing briefly and intentionally on Jabari as she added, "No excuses. We rebuild together or we don't rebuild at all." A faint ripple of pride flickered in his expression. For the first time, he wanted to rise to her expectations. After the meeting, employees returned to their tasks. Jabari stayed behind, staring at the whiteboard filled with data. "You know," a voice said behind him, "you look better working than you ever did pretending to lead." He turned. It was Musa, Aisha's colleague, visiting the warehouse for system installation. Jabari bristled reflexively, but Musa lifted a hand in peace. "I'm not here to insult you," Musa said. "Honestly, I'm impressed you showed up." Jabari exhaled. "I couldn't run anymore." Musa nodded, leaning against a crate. "She's changed, hasn't she?" Jabari's gaze softened. "No. She became who she always was. I'm the one who never saw it." It was the first time Musa felt sympathy for him. Asterisk. While Jabari worked on rebuilding himself, Aisha spent her nights refining strategies and preparing reports for the executive board. She poured her whole heart into the work, not because she was trying to prove anything, but because she finally loved what she did. Her job wasn't just employment, it was purpose. One evening, she returned to the warehouse unexpectedly to retrieve an important file. Most employees had already gone home, but she heard soft muttering from the inventory section. Jabari, he was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by stacks of records. A flickering desk lamp cast shadows across his worn expression. He didn't notice her at first, too absorbed in sorting decades-old data. Aisha watched him quietly for a moment. His once flawless clothes were now smudged with dust. His posture, once so proud, was bent in concentration. But there was something beautiful about the humility in his movements. He wasn't performing. He wasn't pretending. He was genuinely trying. She stepped forward gently. "You're still here," Jabari looked up, startled. "Aisha, I didn't hear you come in." "You should rest," she said softly. He shook his head. "I need to finish this audit. The numbers from last quarter were a disaster. If I don't clean this up, the new system will choke." Aisha folded her arms. "That's not your responsibility alone." He met her gaze sincerely. "Maybe not, but it was my mess, and I want to help fix it." Aisha's breath caught. Not because he said the words, but because he meant them. There was no pride in his tone, no bitterness, just genuine accountability. For the first time, she saw the man he could have been if he had allowed himself to be human instead of invincible. She sat down across from him. "Show me what you've done so far." Jabari blinked. "You want to help. I want to see your progress," she corrected, hiding a small smile. They worked side by side for over an hour, reviewing old contracts and cross-checking numbers. At first, the air between them was thick with awkwardness. Two people learning how to exist in the same space without repeating past mistakes. But slowly the tension eased. They spoke normally, calmly, respectfully. At one point, Jabari glanced over and said quietly, "You're good at this. Better than I ever was." Aisha didn't look up from her papers. "You could be good too if you learned to listen." He nodded. "I know that now." Another long silence. Then her phone vibrated. She checked it. It was a reminder for the next morning's board presentation. She stood. "I should go." Jabari rose too. "Aisha, before you leave, may I say something?" She paused. "Yes." He inhaled deeply. "When I told you you're nothing without me, I believed it. Truly. And now, every day I see how wrong I was. You were never beneath me. You were the best part of the life I ruined." Aisha felt a tightness in her throat. "Jabari, I'm not asking for forgiveness," he interrupted softly. "I'm asking for the chance to become someone deserving of forgiveness one day." The honesty pierced her heart, not as a plea but as a truth. She nodded gently. "Then start here. Start now. Start with yourself." He bowed his head slightly as if receiving a blessing. "I will." She left the warehouse that night, feeling strangely light, like something old had been released into the air. Asterisk, asterisk. The next morning, Aisha delivered one of the most important presentations of her career. She spoke about logistics, restructuring employee retention, systemic inefficiencies, and measurable growth trajectories. The board listened attentively, impressed by her command of the data and her clarity of vision. When she finished, the CEO leaned back and exchanged glances with the other executives. "Aisha," he said, "your insights have shifted the direction of this project entirely. Your leadership is exceptional. We believe you're ready for the next level," another board member added. "We'd like to nominate you for the permanent role of operations director." Aisha froze. Her breath caught. Her heart raced. Her world expanded. Permanent, director, leadership. The titles echoed in her soul. "Do you accept?" the CEO asked with a smile. Aisha swallowed, tears burning behind her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. "I accept." As applause filled the room, her mind drifted back to the girl she once was, the one who believed she had no worth. And she thought of the man who once said she was nothing. Now she was rising to heights he could never have imagined. And he, through his downfall, was finally learning the lesson he needed most. Life was teaching both of them, but in very different ways. The news of Aisha's promotion spread through MTech like wildfire. Colleagues congratulated her with genuine excitement, supervisors shook her hand with newfound respect, and even executives who barely noticed her months ago now nodded when they passed her in the hall. But Aisha didn't let the praise distract her. She carried it with quiet dignity, grounding herself in gratitude rather than pride. The first thing she did as permanent operations director was schedule a full company address for the logistics division, formerly Jabari's division. She wanted to reassure employees, ease anxieties, and provide a vision for the future. It was critical they knew they weren't losing their jobs, but gaining stability under new leadership. The meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. Aisha arrived early, reviewing her notes in the conference room while technicians tested microphones. As employees filed into the large warehouse space, Jabari entered quietly, staying toward the back. He wore the same coordinator uniform as the others, a navy blue shirt, worn jeans, steel-toe boots. His posture was humble, respectful, different. Aisha took the stage with confidence. "Good morning, everyone," she began. Her voice echoed through the speakers, calm yet commanding. "I know the past year has been difficult. Your jobs, your future, and your dignity have been shaken by instability and poor leadership." Several employees nodded, exchanging weary glances. "But all of that changes now," she continued. "Together we are building something new, something stronger, fairer, and more sustainable. You are not just workers, you are partners in this transformation." Hope flickered across their faces. She outlined new policies, fair contract terms, health benefits, training programs, updated equipment, and a clear path for promotions. Chatter rose in the crowd, surprised, relieved, even grateful. Jabari watched from the back, his eyes shining with mixed emotions, shame, but also admiration. This was leadership, real leadership, the kind he never mastered. Aisha closed the meeting with steady determination. "We rebuild, not by looking backward, but by moving forward together." Applause erupted. For the first time in a long time, the warehouse felt alive. Asterisk, asterisk. After the meeting, as employees returned to work, Jabari lingered behind. Aisha was collecting her notes, preparing to leave, when she sensed someone approaching. She turned. Jabari stood there. "I wanted to say, that was incredible," he said quietly. Thank you, she replied professionally. And you're right, he added. The team needs this. They need someone who actually cares. Aisha gave a small nod. People work better when they're valued, he sighed. I never valued them. Or you. I only valued what made me feel big. Aisha didn't respond. She didn't need to. The truth lay plainly between them. After a moment, Jabari cleared his throat. There's something else. They assigned me to help reorganize the delivery route system. I'm not great with the software. Could you show me how it works? Aisha hesitated. Not because she didn't want to help, but because helping him meant stepping into a space she had once lived in for years, supporting him, teaching him, lifting him. But this time she wasn't doing it as a wife trying to save her marriage. She was doing it as a leader helping an employee grow. Yes, she said finally. I can show you. Jabari exhaled, relieved. They went to her office, a simple yet modern space, with glass walls overlooking the warehouse. She sat behind her desk, opened the software dashboard, and gestured for him to sit across from her. He leaned forward attentively as she explained. This tab shows route optimization. This panel tracks driver performance. And here she clicked a button you can see shipment timing issues. Jabari scribbled notes like a student desperate not to miss anything. You're good at teaching, he said quietly. Aisha shrugged. I've had good mentors, and I never let you be one, he murmured. She froze subtly. The words hit deeper than he knew. He looked up, meeting her eyes. You deserve more, Aisha. More than I ever gave you. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned the conversation back to the system. He learned quickly, surprisingly quickly. Humility had sharpened his focus. They worked together for nearly an hour. When they finished, Jabari stood. Thank you, he said sincerely. I know you don't owe me anything. I know what I cost you. Aisha looked at him. What you cost me, she said gently, was who I used to be. But I chose to rebuild myself. You didn't take that from me, I gave it away. His chest tightened. Then I hope one day you'll see the man I'm trying to become. She didn't make promises. She simply nodded. As Jabari walked out, Aisha exhaled long and slow. She wasn't sure what she felt, compassion, closure, or caution. Maybe all three. Weeks passed, and the division's performance soared. Efficiency improved. Employee morale lifted. Managers cooperated. Systems synced smoothly. And Jabari, he worked harder than anyone expected. He arrived early, stayed late, took on the most tedious tasks without complaint. He asked questions, stayed humble, apologized when he made mistakes, and thanked those who helped him. Employees who once resented him started warming up. Musa even said one day, maybe he's changing. One morning, Aisha conducted an unannounced inspection. She walked through aisles of neatly organized inventory, scanning labels, checking workflow charts. When she reached the loading dock, she found Jabari giving instructions to a group of new hires. And if you're not sure about the labeling, ask. No shame in asking. Mistakes are lessons, not failures. Aisha paused, listening. That was not the old Jabari. That was someone new. Someone humbled. Someone reshaping himself. Later, when the group dispersed, she approached him. You're doing well, she said simply. He turned startled. I'm trying. I can see that. For a moment, they just stood there, two people sharing quiet acknowledgement. Aisha, he said softly, I want to say something. If you have a moment, she folded her arms. Go ahead. He swallowed. I don't want us back the way we were. Not unless you want it, and not unless I've changed enough to deserve another chance. But I want to be someone you can respect, even if only from a distance. Aisha's heart didn't race. It didn't ache. It simply listened. Respect, she said, gently comes with consistency. He nodded. Then I'll be consistent. She nodded back. Good. Asterisk. One Friday afternoon, the logistics division gathered for a progress celebration. Zuri came to speak, praising Aisha's leadership. Team members cheered, clapped, and raised cups of juice in her honor. Jabari watched from the crowd, a quiet smile on his face. Not jealous, not bitter, but proud. Proud of her. Proud he could witness her rise. Proud he was finally learning to stand on his own. Later, when the event ended and people trickled out, Aisha stepped outside into the cool evening air. Jabari followed a moment later, stopping a respectful distance away. I'm glad I got to see you shine, he said softly. Aisha turned toward him, illuminated by the sunset. I didn't shine to hurt you, she replied. I know, he said. And I didn't fall to punish you. Aisha nodded. Life is teaching us both. He smiled sadly. And for the first time, I'm ready to learn. Aisha looked at him, truly looked, and saw, not the man who once belittled her, but the man shaped by the consequences of his own choices. Whether their paths would someday intersect again in love, or simply in mutual respect, she did not yet know. But she knew this, the power balance between them had shifted forever. He was not above her. She was not beneath him. They now stood on separate ground, stronger, wiser, freer. And their story was far from finished. Aisha's rise had been steady, undeniable, built step by step on discipline, humility, and courage. But the true test of her leadership came in the weeks that followed, when the logistics division faced its first post-acquisition crisis. One morning, as she reviewed performance dashboards in her office, a red alert flashed across her screen: critical delivery failure, Eastern region. Delays had stretched to 48 hours. Customer complaints were rising. A key retailer threatened to terminate their partnership if the issue wasn't resolved immediately. Aisha's stomach tightened. A crisis this early in the restructuring phase could undermine everything she'd built. She called an emergency meeting with all supervisors. Within minutes, the conference room filled 10 managers seated around the table, some anxious, others frustrated. Jabari slipped in quietly, taking a seat near the back. His posture was straight, his face focused. If he felt nervous, he hid it well. Aisha stood at the front, projecting calm authority. "We have a serious situation," she began. "Eastern routes are failing. Inventory isn't moving. We need to diagnose this immediately." A murmur rippled through the room. One supervisor spoke up. "We think it's because the distribution center over there still uses the old tracking system." Another added, "Their drivers aren't trained on the new equipment. Transitioning them will take weeks." Aisha listened carefully, hands clasped behind her back. Then she asked, "Has anyone actually visited the center in the past 2 weeks?" Silence. People shifted uncomfortably. Some glanced away. Aisha's gaze sharpened. "If we don't understand a problem from the ground, we'll never solve it from the top." Jabari cleared his throat. "Director, if I may." All eyes turned to him. He rarely spoke in meetings. Ever since the acquisition, he preferred to observe, quietly contributing only when necessary. Aisha nodded. "Go ahead. I helped set up that distribution center years ago," he said. "I know the layout, the staff, the routes. If anyone should go inspect it, it might be me." Aisha studied him for a moment. His tone was respectful, not assertive. Honest, not performative. "What do you recommend?" she asked. "We need someone who understands the old system," and the new Jabari replied. "Someone who can talk to the drivers without making them feel like they're being replaced. And someone who knows the operational flow well enough to detect where the bottleneck is happening." "Someone like you," another supervisor muttered. Aisha remained quiet, considering the implications. She had been hesitant to assign him too much responsibility, worried he wasn't ready, or that he might slip back into old habits. But the man before her was not the man he used to be. His humility was genuine. His work ethic had become exemplary. Finally, she said, "All right, you'll lead the on-site inspection." Jabari blinked, surprised. "I thank you. I won't disappoint you." She nodded. "You'll take a small team with you, and I want a preliminary report in 24 hours. The meeting dissolved into movement managers assigning personnel assistants, gathering documents. Jabari approached her desk afterward. "Aisha," he said softly, "thank you for trusting me." She looked up from her notes. "Trust isn't a gift, Jabari. It's earned. You're earning it." He lowered his gaze, humbled, grateful. "I'll do everything I can to fix this." "I know," she replied. Asterisk. The inspection team left early the next morning. Aisha watched from the entrance as Jabari climbed into the company van. He glanced back once, offering a small but sincere nod. It struck her that this might be the first time she had seen him embark on something, not for pride, not for applause, but simply to do what was right. By afternoon, Aisha received an update. From Jabari Moyo, subject initial findings, Eastern Center. She opened the document. Jabari's observations were sharp, thorough, and accurate. He identified 3 critical issues: outdated sorting protocols. Workers were using manual logs instead of the new digital system, causing massive delays. Driver communication breakdown, radios were malfunctioning, leaving half the drivers unreachable during peak hours. Warehouse congestion. The loading bay design created bottlenecks, slowing down truck departures. He also recommended immediate fixes that were both realistic and cost-effective. Aisha felt a wave of pride, not for herself, but for the man he was becoming. He was finally using his intelligence without arrogance, his experience without entitlement. She called him. Hello, his voice came through slightly breathless from active work. Your report is excellent, she said. He paused, taken aback. Thank you, Aisha. That means more than you know. You're doing well, she added. Keep going. His reply was soft. I will. Asterisk. Asterisk. The next 48 hours were intense. Jabari coordinated with drivers, technicians, and warehouse staff to implement emergency solutions. He and his team worked late into the night, sleeping in shifts fueled by determination. He updated Aisha, regularly sending photos, notes, and progress trackers. His tone remained humble, his efforts tireless. On the third day, the crisis shifted. The red alert on her dashboard turned yellow. Then green. Deliveries were back on track. Complaints dropped. The key retailer retracted their termination threat. Aisha gathered the supervisors for a final review. Whoever handled the Eastern inspection did incredible work, one manager said. Aisha nodded. They did. Later, after most employees had gone home, Jabari entered her office again. Dust on his boots, tired circles under his eyes, but smiling for the first time in weeks. It's fixed, he said simply. Yes, she replied. Because of you. He looked away, emotional. I didn't think I'd ever hear you say that. Aisha leaned back slightly. Jabari, what you did matters. For the team, for the company, and for yourself. He exhaled shakily. I'm trying so hard to change. Not because I want you back. Not because I want forgiveness. But because I'm tired of being the man I used to be. She regarded him quietly. You're not that man anymore. He swallowed. You really believe that? Yes, she said. But change must be continuous, not just momentary. He nodded. I understand. He turned to leave but paused. Aisha, may I ask you something? She hesitated. What is it? If, someday, I become the man I should have been, would there ever be a chance for us? The question was not desperate, not pressuring, not entitled. It was hopeful, gentle, human. Aisha didn't answer immediately. She walked toward the window, looking out at the warehouse workers below, moving like busy ants in a system that was finally functioning smoothly. After a long moment, she spoke. Jabari, I can't promise anything. Our past is heavy. Our wounds are deep. And I'm still healing. He nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting both acceptance and disappointment. But she continued softly, if we both continue growing, who knows what the future might hold. His breath caught. That's enough, he said quietly. More than enough. He stepped out of her office, closing the door gently behind him. Aisha stood alone in the quiet space, feeling a strange, warm calm settle into her chest. Not love, not hope, not regret. Peace. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the future, whatever it might bring, and neither was he. Outside, the warehouse hummed with new life. Inside, two hearts once broken by pride and pain were learning slowly but surely how to beat stronger. Not together, not yet, but maybe, someday. Aisha's first month as permanent operations director became a testament to everything she had worked for. The logistics division, once chaotic, unstable, and demoralized, was now functioning with a rhythm that impressed even the most skeptical executives. Efficiency rose, errors dropped, employee satisfaction soared. And for the first time in years, the company's quarterly projections showed upward momentum in the logistics sector. But as her professional world blossomed, Aisha found herself facing questions that had nothing to do with spreadsheets, reports, or leadership. Questions of the heart, questions of forgiveness, questions of identity. She had grown into a new version of herself, strong, confident, centered. Yet growth doesn't erase the past. It simply reframes it. And in her quiet moments, she often wondered, what does healing look like? What does closure look like? What does a future look like when the past still echoes? The answers, she realized, would arrive slowly. One Friday afternoon, Aisha held a full department meeting to announce the division's new quarterly goals. Hundreds of employees gathered: drivers, supervisors, coordinators, technicians, office staff. Among them was Jabari, standing near the back. He no longer shrank in shame, but he no longer pushed himself into the spotlight either. He existed in a steady, grounded space, humble, open learning. Aisha stepped to the podium. I want to thank every one of you, she began, her voice warm and authoritative. Your commitment has transformed this division. You've shown resilience, integrity, and teamwork. We are building something remarkable together. Applause rippled through the room. Some employees cheered, others nodded proudly. And there is someone in this division, she continued, who deserves particular recognition. Someone who stepped up during a crisis with courage and humility. Someone who reminded us that leadership is not about title, it's about action. A quiet murmur spread. People exchanged guesses. Jabari's eyes widened. Aisha met his gaze deliberately. Jabari Moyo, please come forward. The warehouse buzzed with surprise. Jabari froze in place, eyes flickering with disbelief. Slowly he made his way to the front, each step heavy with emotion. When he reached the podium, he didn't try to smile. He didn't play confident. He simply stood there, breathing deeply. Aisha turned to him. You helped save this division from serious loss, she said. You showed accountability, work ethic, and genuine growth. Your contribution matters, and we see it. She extended a certificate of recognition. Jabari accepted it with trembling hands. Applause erupted once more, loud, sincere, powerful. For the first time in years, Jabari wasn't being applauded for what he pretended to be, but for who he was finally becoming. After the meeting, as employees filtered out, Jabari lingered behind. Aisha, he began, voice thick. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, she replied gently. No, he swallowed. I need to. You didn't have to do that. You didn't owe me that. I didn't do it for you, she said. I did it because it was true. He nodded slowly, eyes soft with gratitude. They walked outside together into the fading afternoon light. A gentle breeze rustled the trees lining the parking lot, scattering leaves across the pavement. I never imagined we'd end up here, Jabari said quietly. You leading, me learning. Aisha looked out over the horizon. Life has a strange way of teaching us what we refuse to learn on our own, he exhaled. I used to think power meant control, that leadership meant dominance. But watching you, I realize now that true strength is the ability to lift others, not push them down. Aisha turned to face him. And I used to think love meant sacrifice. That being a good wife meant shrinking myself. But I was wrong too. Love without respect is bondage. He nodded. You deserved a better version of me, and I'm sorry you never got that. She didn't flinch from his honesty. Maybe we both deserved better versions of ourselves. A moment of silence settled between them, soft, forgiving, bittersweet. I don't expect anything, Jabari said. Not reconciliation, not another chance. I want you to know that I'm grateful. For everything, for your strength, for your patience, for holding on even when I didn't deserve it. Aisha studied him carefully. The man before her was not the man who once belittled her. Not the man who mocked her worth. Not the man who believed himself infallible. This man was humbled, self-aware, beginning again. I believe people can change, she said softly. But change takes time and consistency. I know, he replied, and I'll prove it. Even if it's never enough to change our relationship, it will be enough to change who I am. Aisha smiled gently, not with longing, not with regret, but with peace. That's all that matters. They stood there for a while, neither speaking, both breathing in the quiet understanding that their paths, once intertwined painfully, were now running parallel in a calmer, wiser way. Finally, Aisha said, Take care of yourself, Jabari. He nodded. You too, Aisha. She walked away, first her steps sure and graceful. He watched her go, this woman he once underestimated now, shining brighter than he knew possible. And for the first time, he didn't feel resentment, he felt pride. Not the kind born from possession, the kind born from recognition. Aisha reached her car, but paused before opening the door. She looked back. Jabari was still standing there watching with a soft expression. Not longing, not anger, respect. Their eyes met, warm, honest, steady. A silent goodbye passed between them. Not the end of something broken, but the beginning of something healed. Whatever the future held, whether their lives stayed separate, intertwined, or something in between, they would meet it stronger than before. Aisha drove away with a heart unburdened. Jabari remained with a heart finally awakening. And life moved forward as it always does. In life, the people we love can sometimes become the mirrors that distort our own worth. But no one, not a spouse, not society, not circumstance, has the right to define who we can become. True power lies not in control, but in growth. True strength lies not in dominance, but in humility. And true healing begins when we stop shrinking ourselves to fit the expectations of others. Aisha's journey reminds us that rising isn't an act of rebellion, it's an act of self-respect. And Jabari's path shows that downfall isn't the end. It can be the beginning of transformation if we let the truth humble us. So ask yourself, Where are you shrinking? Where are you resisting growth? And who could you become if you finally chose yourself? If this story touched, you share your thoughts in the comments and remember to subscribe for more emotional African folktale drama.